Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we are going to work with a jewel orchid with my Ludisia discolor. I told you in a previous video that I really want to repot this orchid because look at this perlite. It looks horrible, but more than that, I've seen a lot of snails on this orchid, and bush snails are nothing to joke around about. So today we're going to bring this orchid from this state to something more like this, which looks quite a lot better, looks more tidy, and most of all, it's a setup that doesn't have snails. Now, snails have been the bane of my existence in my first year of growing orchids, when I actually lost quite a few orchids to them because they tend to munch on the brand new roots, which in some cases, especially for dealing with sick orchids, are crucial to their recovery. And if they don't have any roots to munch on, they will munch on fresh new growth. And I had it happen with my cymbidium. So as I was saying, nothing to joke around about. I saw 2 bush snails on the rhizome of this orchid, and I also see damage, which I will show you. Maybe we're gonna see a bush snail or 2 as well. One good thing came out of that 1 year of nightmares for me. I know how to take care of bush snails forever. The reason why I have snails on this orchid is that I didn't really treat it when I purchased it. I thought it would not have snails, and I was wrong. So first and foremost, we are going to take it out of this medium. It's good soil, it's not bad, it's not old, but it's infested with snails, so I'm gonna dump it in the garden and let them fend for themselves there. But yeah, I don't want them in this pot anymore. So let's get to work. Alright, so I'm not entirely sure how full of roots this pot is, but I'm gonna press a little bit on it just to make sure that the existing roots, if they're attached to the sides, they will detach. And then I'm just gonna dig in, to be fully honest, and try to push the orchid up from below, if that makes any sense. I'll show you what I mean. And there we have her. Oh, I was expecting a better root system. I bet you the snails have something to do with it. Okay, now then, what do we have here? Yeah, I do remember this orchid actually was made out of multiple stems pot together. It's a practice that happens a lot with houseplants, with vines, and why not with the Ludisia discolor, because it does have a creeping nature and it is terrestrial. It's not really treated as an epiphytic orchid. So I do remember I had multiple stems here. Now the problem is that I do want to remove all of this soil from it. I'll show you how to go about that, but now I want to remove as much as I can without actually damaging anything. If you wanted, you could propagate this orchid with these runners. Something like this, you can totally stick it in soil, it will catch, it will form a brand new plant. And if you want a bushier jewel orchid, you can definitely pot it with the other stems and it will look really nice. Okay, I think I sorted all of the stems. I didn't see any snail, although they're very hard to see because they're brown. However, let me just show you the damage that they can make. Where did I see it? There you go. Do you see this little hole here? That most probably is snail damage. And who knows how many new growths they've already attacked and munched up. In orchid roots, the damage looks exactly like a hole. It's a perfect hole. And in new growth, it looks something very, very similar to this. So definitely, if you ever see tiny, cute little snails, don't wait around to see the damage as well. Trust me, they're cute, but they're not friendly to plants at all. And trust me, they're hard to get rid of with conventional pellets and things of the sorts. I tried them for an entire year. I'll show you what works though. So first things first, I need to clean up the roots at the sink. I will rinse as much of the soil off as possible. Alright, so the secret ingredient against bush snails is hydrogen peroxide 3%. If you go to the human pharmacy, maybe the vet pharmacy as well, you will find the solution. It is not toxic, you use it on your wounds actually. Well, it works wonders against snails and not only their eggs as well. I wouldn't recommend you use higher concentrations. You can find hydrogen peroxide as it is at a 3% concentration, which you can use straight from the bottle, but on the market it's also common to find the 6% concentration and also the 9%. What you can do is dilute them. The best way to dilute them is with using pure water, such as distilled water. I use reverse osmosis water, and what you do is combine them so you get a formulation of 3%. For example, the 6%, what I do is dump it into a different container and then put the same quantity of pure water, so I dilute it half and half, and I get a 3% concentration. If I find a 9% concentration, I use twice as much pure water. Does it make sense? So 1 part hydrogen peroxide, 9%, and 2 parts plain water, and that will reduce it to a 3% concentration. So what I do is I pour the 3% concentration solution into a spray bottle and dose the root system, and in this case the rhizomes as well, everything that touches the soil, in hydrogen peroxide. There is no need to spray the actual orchid. These snails really don't like drought. They don't really walk nicely on dry surfaces, so they will never be here. They're not slugs. But definitely all of these stems and roots that come in contact with the soil, I will spray. So I'll go ahead and do that real fast now. Now, if a little bit touches the leaves, it's perfectly fine. It's just not my aim. But I have so many stems that inevitably some of this substance touches the leaves. At this point, you do not need to rinse, because after the initial reaction, all you will have left is water. But if you listen closely, do you hear a fizzing? That is absolutely normal. Don't be scared if you hear that. It means your solution is actually good. It's working. If you don't hear anything, then probably the solution lost oxygen and you only have water in the bottle. So this is a good sign that the hydrogen peroxide is reacting to the organics, which is okay. In my experience, it really doesn't harm plants or their roots. But of course, I only have experience with orchids, so keep that in mind. With other plants, it might react. All right, so I'm gonna let it fizz for a few minutes, and I'm going to prepare my new pot and my new medium. All right, so the pot I'm going for is a shallow but wide pot, and of course it looks much better than the old plastic one. This looks like unglazed terracotta, but it does have a layer of something matte. It doesn't really transpire water, so with this type of pot, I will not have salt deposits, algae molds, things of the sorts. Also, it will retain the moisture in. I kind of really like these pots because I get a little bit of both worlds, the look of an unglazed pot, but also the water retention. There is nothing wrong with unglazed pots. It's personal preference and depends what works best in your environment. At the bottom, I will actually cover the drainage hole, which is fairly large, with some sphagnum moss. Many people use many different things, but I have sphagnum moss, so that's what I'm gonna use. And the reason for choosing a wider pot opposed to a taller pot is that the Ludisia discolor tends to lean over the pot. If the pot is too narrow, it will spill, but it's not gonna look good. It's not the good type of spilling. I do have some footage to show you. I did try the Ludisia in a self-watering pot, which was extremely narrow but tall. I envisioned that it will spill nicely over the pot like a pothos, if you know that plant. But no, it absolutely didn't do that. It actually didn't really like that setup. And also, these types of orchids don't tend to have really long roots. So shallower and wider is the way to go. The medium that I will use is the same as the one that I discarded. It's an all-purpose soil that I mixed with 50% perlite. And this is a perfect mixture for my environment. It drains very well, but still retains water. It's very airy, very fluffy, and even if this orchid is a terrestrial orchid, it doesn't mean it likes to sit in very heavy clay soils. So this works out just fine for me. There are other recipes you can do as well. And if you don't like soils, you can definitely go for some cocoa peat. That works well as well. Again, it's just personal preference. So I'm gonna put a layer of this medium on the bottom because, as you saw, my orchid doesn't really have too much of a root system. All right, this should be enough, hopefully. Let's see. Oh yeah. I'm gonna work on arranging them in a cute manner so that they look nice, but also they get the benefit of the soil. These orchids do not create aerial roots. They're not epiphytic. And I also want to make sure that the shoots are not really spilling over the pot just yet. It's absolutely fine if some of these stems are on top of each other. They will find their way. And I think I found a pretty nice display. Now I'm just gonna continue to place soil under them, raise them up a little bit, and make sure that these rhizomes do touch the soil. All right, I think we're looking really nice. However, we're not done yet. As you saw in the previous pot, the perlite tends to get absolutely horrible in time. It tends to get stained, it gets muddy. When you water it, it just piles at the surface. I think you actually saw how the roots, they were clinging onto it. It's really not up my alley. So what I like to do is add a layer of bark chips on top, which will hide a little bit the perlite. However, I have a new product that I want to try today. Hopefully, we'll see if it's adequate. Let me bring it. Now, if you're older on my channel, you might already know that I prefer the Zoomed Repti bark for my orchids. But the size of it is kind of tiny, and sometimes I do feel the need for something larger. Not for orchids, but for top layers. And well, at the store the other day, look what I found. Bark for top layers. And guess what? It's actually super cheap. I paid €2 or something for this bag, $2.50, something of the sorts. I purchased it from Leroy Merlin, which is a chain of home improvement stores here in Europe. If you're from Europe, you might want to give it a visit if you need something like this in your life. I don't know if this is adequate for epiphytic orchids because they prefer a bark which has been treated to be more long-lasting. But for top layering, as we can see in the picture here, maybe just normal leftover bark from the furniture industry might be good. Great way to reuse it, right? So I want to see how it looks like. It is moist, which is nice because it's not going to be all dusty. Ooh, it does have big chunks. And it actually has springtails on it. Now, if you don't know what springtails are, they're absolutely normal. They're soil dwellers, they're insects. I know some people don't like insects. I'm very okay with them because they help the ecosystem. This is not sterile, you guys. So if you have an issue with springtails and other soil dwellers, maybe this is not for you. I do want to pour it in a different container and maybe try to find the smaller sized pieces. This is a little too extreme. I might not use this. Yeah, okay, this is too large. Okay, this is for big planters, not my Ludisia. So I will definitely find good use for it with my houseplants, but not with this orchid. All right, so back to what we were doing here. I will go ahead and add a top layer of bark chips on top of this orchid. This bark I actually use with my epiphytic orchids as well. I find it pretty good. Obviously, it's not as good as something like Orchiada, which is differently treated and it's more long-lasting, at least in theory, but I kind of like it. It does okay with my orchids and I find it locally, which is great. I never actually found soil dwellers in this type of bark. It is intended for reptiles, so I'm guessing it is treated at least thermally. Maybe it's sterilized, I'm not entirely sure, but I've never seen springtails or anything of the sorts with this bark. That's why I started my colonies. I carefully collected them from my established orchids. I have a lot of tiny little stems here, which I can easily pick out and raise above this bark, but with those big pieces, that would have been impossible. So I'm raising the stems gently wherever I see that they are just a little bit too buried, because from the stems you actually have new growth. I want the new growth to have light and develop fast. The bushier a Ludisia is, the better. There we go. I think we are looking good. All that's left to do is to properly water this orchid at the sink and then place it back where I keep it. And I'll show you the setup that I have for it. So I actually keep it under a grow light in this IKEA stand. If you missed the video in which I arranged the stand, check it down below, I'll link you to it. In that video, I am using a different jewel orchid for inspiration purposes. But these orchids are not highlight plants, and up until now I did have it on the floor. And now with this new pot, I can see it's not sitting all that straight, but it's okay, it's sitting, and that's what matters. So the next thing that I want to do is remove all of these water droplets from the leaves and from the crowns of the new growths because one, they will leave stains. The water that I have at the sink is not very soft, so it will leave salt residue. And second, I don't want the new growths to rot by any chance. If that water doesn't evaporate and bacteria accumulate, it could rot those growths. And I don't want that. I want this orchid to be luscious and pretty and stain-free. P.S. If you have very dry skin and feel little micro wounds like I have due to all of this gardening that I do, hydrogen peroxide will react and will sting a lot. So if you have that type of skin, maybe wear some gloves because this is prickly as heck right now. I need to wash it. It's not gonna harm you, don't worry, but that's what happens when you have dry skin. And I actually always use gloves whenever I deal with hydrogen peroxide. So that is about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this useful. I hope that now you will not have issues with snails anymore if you've ever encountered them. But like with any new treatment, please always try out on one orchid or one root first. See how everything works out for you. Everybody has access to different types of products. There are many variables here, and I don't want you to destroy your plants or orchids. So keep that in mind. And with that said, I hope you have a great day today. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!